Level 1. The Rookie in Blue.
Your alarm goes off at 4:47 in the morning. Not because your shift starts at 5. It starts at 6. But you've been lying awake for 40 minutes already, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in your head that you've never actually lived, just trained for, just imagined, just hoped you'd handle correctly when the moment came. You're 23 years old. You graduated from the police academy 11 weeks ago. And today, like every day before it, you will strap on 35 pounds of gear, climb into a patrol car that smells like stale coffee and someone else's adrenaline, and drive into a city that doesn't always want you there. This is where every SWAT operator begins. Not with a black uniform and a ballistic helmet, with a regular patrol shift and the slow, grinding education of real life. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, there are approximately 800,000 sworn law enforcement officers in the United States. Of those, somewhere between 40,000 and 50,000 serve on SWAT or tactical units at any given time. That means fewer than 6% of all officers will ever make it onto a team. And every single one of them started exactly where you are right now, on patrol, learning the streets, learning people, learning themselves. In your first year, you respond to domestic violence calls at 2 a.m. You talk suicidal people off ledges. You're the first one through the door after a shooting and the last one to leave after a death. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Traumatic Stress found that police officers are exposed to an average of 188 critical incidents over the course of their careers. Many of those first incidents happen in year 1. You go home and you don't talk about it. You're building something here, even if you can't see it yet. Every call is a data point. Every confrontation is a lesson. Every moment you hold it together when your hands want to shake is a deposit into a psychological bank account you'll draw from later, much later, when the stakes are higher than anything patrol prepared you for. But for now, you drive, you respond, you learn. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you watch the SWAT truck roll past on the highway and you think, maybe. Level 2, the wannabe warrior. 3 years into patrol, you start doing something you've never done before. You start running in full gear. Not because anyone told you to, because you looked up the SWAT selection requirements for your department and you realized with cold clarity that you were not ready. The Los Angeles Police Department's SWAT unit, one of the oldest and most respected tactical units in the country, founded in 1967, requires candidates to complete a physical fitness test that includes a 1.5-mile run in under 10 minutes and 30 seconds, push-ups, sit-ups, and an obstacle course that breaks people who thought they were in shape. And LAPD is just one agency. Some federal tactical teams push far beyond that. So you run, you lift, you qualify on the range every chance you get, because most departments require applicants to score at or above 90% accuracy in tactical shooting qualifications. And that bar exists for a reason. But here's what no one tells you in the brochure. The physical test is almost the easy part. The application process for most SWAT units includes a psychological evaluation, background investigation, peer interviews, command review boards, and sometimes a polygraph. A 2017 study in Police Quarterly found that psychological resilience, emotional regulation, and team cohesion were among the top predictors of long-term SWAT performance, more reliable predictors than raw physical fitness alone. They're not just asking if you can run fast. They're asking who you are when no one's watching. They're asking if you can take an order you disagree with and execute it flawlessly. They're asking if your marriage is stable, if your finances are under control, if you have a history of excessive force complaints, if the people who work alongside you every day actually trust you with their lives. Your wife notices the change before you do. You're quieter at dinner, more focused. You started waking up early on days off to train. She doesn't say it out loud, but there's a question forming behind her eyes that won't be answered for a long time yet. Is this the life I signed up for? You submit your application anyway, because some things you have to try, even if they break you. Level 3, the man who almost quit. Day 4 of selection, and you're lying face down in a mud pit at 11 p.m., and a cadre instructor is screaming something at you that you can't quite make out because your ears are ringing from the flashbang simulation they ran 40 minutes ago, and your legs have stopped feeling like legs. They feel like wet concrete attached to a body that's forgetting why it's here. SWAT selection courses vary by department, but the most rigorous programs run anywhere from 1 week to several months of continuous evaluation. According to research published in the International Journal of Police Science and Management, attrition rates during SWAT selection can run as high as 60 to 80%, depending on the agency. The majority of people who apply do not make it through. You are currently in the percentage that might not make it through. They don't just want to see if you can handle physical stress. That's the surface layer. They're watching how you treat the candidate next to you when you're exhausted. They're watching whether you cut corners when the instructors turn their backs. They're watching your decision-making at hour 72 of sleep deprivation, because someday you will be making decisions that affect human lives under those exact conditions. Sleep deprivation research from the University of Washington found that after 24 hours without sleep, cognitive performance decreased to a level equivalent to a blood alcohol content of 0.10, legally drunk in every state. SWAT operators train in these conditions deliberately because the body can be pushed, but the mind must be trained to push back. On day 6, a candidate next to you, a decorated patrol officer, 12 years on the job, built like a linebacker, sits down on a log during a stress exercise and doesn't get back up. He's not injured. He's just done. He looks at the ground for a long moment, then looks up at the cadre instructor and says quietly, "I'm out." Nobody says anything. You look at him, and then you look back at the trail ahead, and you make a decision that you will never be able to fully explain. Not to your wife, not to your therapist, not to yourself. You just stand up and keep moving. That decision is the one that changes everything. Level 4, the new guy on the stack. Your first call out as a probationary operator is a barricaded suspect on the 3rd floor of an apartment building at 2:30 in the morning. You are positioned 4 on the entry stack. Your job is to follow the man in front of you, cover your sector, and not screw up. That's it. Don't be a hero. Don't freelance. Don't let the adrenaline override the training. The senior operators around you have run hundreds of these entries. You have run 0. According to the National Tactical Officers Association, the average SWAT team conducts approximately 40,000 call-outs per year across the United States. The majority, roughly 60%, are resolved without entry through negotiation or surrender. But that other 40% means someone is going through a door. Tonight, someone is going through a door. And tonight, that someone includes you. The probationary period for SWAT operators typically runs 6 months to a year. During that time, you are evaluated on everything: your tactical positioning, your communication on the radio, your ability to function in low-light environments, your judgment in dynamic situations, where the situation changes 3 times before you finish processing the first change.
You are watched constantly, not maliciously, protectively, because the team's survival depends on every person on that stack performing at the same level, and you haven't earned the full trust of the team yet. That trust is not given, it is built, call out by call out, training day by training day, until the senior operator who barely spoke to you in month 1 is calling you by your first name and back in your corner in the debrief.
After the call out, which ends in a peaceful surrender, the suspect walking out with his hands up after 40 minutes of negotiation, you sit in the equipment bay and break down your gear, and your hands are shaking. Not from fear, from the adrenaline finally leaving, from the fact that it was real, and you held it together, and no one got hurt, and you were there, actually there, and it counts.
Level 5, the operator. You know things now that can't be untaught. You know how a door sounds different when it's reinforced versus hollow. You know how a person's voice changes when they're about to do something irreversible. You know the layout of the tactical vest by touch alone, in the dark, in a stairwell, with your heart rate at 170 beats per minute, because that's what 400 hours of annual training produces. Full SWAT operators in active units typically train between 16 and 20 hours per week on top of collateral patrol duties. A study from the Police Executive Research Forum found that the average SWAT operator in a mid to large agency spends more time in training annually than operators in many military special operations pipeline programs. The comparison is imperfect, but the commitment is not. You are 5 years into the team now. You've run entries on meth labs, hostage situations, high-risk warrant services, and active shooter scenarios where every second of delay costs something irreplaceable. You've seen things that your family doesn't know about, not because you're hiding them, but because there are no words that translate the experience into something a dinner table can hold. Research from the Rudderman Family Foundation found that more police officers die by suicide each year than in the line of duty. In 2019, at least 228 officers died by suicide, compared to 132 killed in the line of duty. The gap is not small. And SWAT operators, whose callouts by definition involve the highest risk situations a department faces, carry a disproportionate share of that psychological weight.
You've started seeing a therapist. You don't tell many people at work. You go on Tuesday evenings, and you talk about the things you can't say anywhere else. And it's the most tactically sound decision you've made in years. Your marriage is still intact. Some of your teammates aren't. You notice this. You hold it quietly. Because this job gives with one hand and takes with the other. And the full operator, the one who's been here long enough to know, has learned to watch that other hand very carefully.
Level 6, the specialist. At some point, the team needs you to become more than a body on the stack. They need you to become a weapon with a specific purpose. Senior operators typically develop specializations after 3 to 5 years on the team. Breaching, crisis negotiation, technical surveillance, K9 integration, or the role that carries perhaps the most psychological weight of any position in law enforcement: sniper. SWAT snipers operate under a standard that has almost no equivalent in civilian life. FBI sniper qualification standards require shooters to achieve 100% accuracy on a defined course of fire. Not 95%, not 98%, 100%. Because in a real-world scenario, the sniper's bullet has no margin for error. It either saves a life or takes the wrong one. Breachers, the operators responsible for defeating doors, walls, and barriers during entry, carry a different burden.
They are the first point of exposure in any forced entry. They absorb the initial danger so the team can flow through. A study of tactical injuries found that entry points are disproportionately represented in SWAT casualties, which means the breacher's role is not just technical, it's sacrificial in the truest professional sense.
You've chosen a path. You've spent 600 hours in sniper school. You've learned to control your heartbeat between rounds. You've learned to wait, sometimes for hours, in position, watching a situation through an 18-power scope, ready for a shot that may never come, and equally ready for one that must come in under 2 seconds. The hardest part is not the shot. The hardest part is the waiting, the stillness, the watching, knowing that the entire situation, every negotiator's word, every commander's plan, is built on the foundation of your presence at that window and your ability to make a perfect decision in the worst possible moment. You carry that responsibility home with you every night. Level 7. The one they follow. Leadership in SWAT is not a promotion. It is a transfer of weight. As a team leader, you are no longer responsible only for your own performance. You are responsible for the performance, the readiness, the safety, and the psychological well-being of 4 to 8 operators who trust you with their lives in the most literal sense that phrase can be used.
Research from the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that first-line supervisors in high-stress occupations absorb stress from both above and below, pressure from command on one side and the needs of their team on the other. SWAT team leaders sit at that exact intersection, managing operational expectations from command while shielding their operators from institutional noise during the most dangerous moments of their careers.
You are the one who writes the operation order for an entry. You are the one who stands at the whiteboard and walks your team through the floor plan, the threat assessment, the contingencies, the abort criteria. You are the one who makes the call on the threshold of a door when the situation has changed from what the plan anticipated, because it always changes, and your team is looking at you for the decision that keeps everyone alive.
A 2020 report from the RAND Corporation found that tactical team leaders identify the rapid reassessment of dynamic situations as the single most demanding cognitive skill in high-risk law enforcement operations. Not physical fitness, not shooting accuracy, the ability to think clearly when everything is moving and nothing is as expected.
You've lost sleep over decisions you made correctly. You've replayed entries you ran flawlessly and still found the moments where it could have gone differently. That is not anxiety. That is the mark of a leader who understands the weight of the role and refuses to put it down.
Level 8. The planner.
You are no longer going through the door. That realization hits you differently than you expected. As assistant commander, your place is at the command post, coordinating resources, managing the intelligence picture, communicating with negotiators, monitoring the situation from the outside while your team moves on the inside. You've traded the visceral clarity of the stack for the grinding complexity of the command post. And some days, that trade feels like loss.
The planning phase of a SWAT operation is where most operations are won or lost, long before anyone moves. Research from the Police Foundation found that inadequate pre-operation planning was a contributing factor in the majority of adverse SWAT outcomes analyzed over a 15-year period. Intelligence failures, incorrect floor plans, underestimated threat levels. The planning officer is the firewall between bad information and catastrophic consequences.
You are now managing relationships with district attorneys, with federal agencies, with city leadership, with the media liaisons who will need a statement regardless of how the operation ends. You are the institutional face of the unit when the commander is unavailable, and the institutional memory when new operators join the team.
Your family has adapted. They've learned not to make plans on short notice. They've learned that when your phone rings at certain hours, dinner ends. They've built a life around the negative space that this career creates, and they've done it with a grace that you do not take lightly.
You watch your operators from the command post, and you see yourself, the version of yourself that ran entries without thinking about everything that could go wrong. And you feel something complicated. Pride, protectiveness, the particular ache of a person who knows too much.
Level 9, the commander. The call comes at 6:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. Active shooter, school, multiple victims reported. Your team is being activated. You have been a SWAT commander for 2 years. You have run 340 callouts in your career. You have trained for this specific scenario more times than you can count. And standing in your kitchen in civilian clothes, phone pressed to your ear, you feel something settle inside you. Not calm exactly, but clarity. The kind of clarity that only exists on the far side of 20 years of preparation.
SWAT commanders operate at the intersection of law, tactics, politics, and human psychology simultaneously. A study from the International Association of Chiefs of Police found that major SWAT incidents involving mass casualty events require commanders to make an average of 23 significant tactical decisions within the first 30 minutes, many of them irreversible. Most of them made on incomplete information.
You are accountable for every one of those decisions, not just operationally, legally. If an operator uses lethal force under your command, your decision-making is part of the review. If a negotiation fails, your timeline is examined. If a civilian is injured during a tactical operation, your planning documents are entered into evidence. You operate under a level of institutional scrutiny that most people in any profession will never experience. After the school situation is resolved, the shooter contained, no additional casualties, your team extracted safely, you sit in the command vehicle and you do not feel triumph. You feel something quieter and more complicated. Gratitude, exhaustion, the particular grief of a person who stood close enough to tragedy to feel its heat without being consumed by it. You drive home. You sit in the driveway for 11 minutes before going inside. Your family knows not to ask. They've learned to read the silence.
Level 10, the weight of every decision.
There is a photograph on your desk. It's from your first year on the team. You're in full kit, grinning like an idiot, standing next to 3 other operators who are also grinning like idiots because you just ran your first successful hostage rescue and everyone went home. One of those operators retired on medical disability after a breaching injury. One transferred out after his second divorce. One is still on the team, a team leader now, someone you mentored without ever quite meaning to.
You are the director of special operations. You oversee not one SWAT team, but an entire division, multiple units, multiple jurisdictions, a budget measured in millions, a head count in the hundreds. You have not run an entry in 6 years. You have not carried a primary weapon in 4. You wear a suit to City Hall, and you brief politicians on tactical doctrine. And you sit on national working groups developing use of force standards that will affect departments across the country. According to the Police Executive Research Forum, there are fewer than 200 individuals in the United States who serve at the director or division chief level for specialized tactical operations in major metropolitan departments.
You are statistically a vanishing fraction of the profession, sitting at the apex of a pyramid built on millions of hours of training, thousands of call-outs, and decades of decisions made in conditions where being wrong was never an abstraction.
The cost is not hidden at this level. It is simply accepted. A 2021 study from the National Institute of Justice found that law enforcement executives report higher rates of cardiovascular disease, sleep disorders, and anxiety-related conditions than officers at lower ranks, a finding that researchers attribute to the sustained, chronic nature of executive-level stress compared to the acute, episodic stress of frontline operations. The body doesn't distinguish between tactical stress and administrative stress. It just accumulates. You've been married for 26 years. Your children are grown. There are conversations you never had with them during certain periods. Months where you were present in body, but somewhere else in your mind. And you've made peace with that imperfectly, the way adults make peace with things that can't be undone. What you have instead is this: the knowledge that the teams you built have saved lives, that the training standards you raised reduced injuries, that the operators you mentored went on to lead, and their operators will lead after them. And somewhere in that chain of competence and sacrifice and quiet professionalism, the city is safer than it would have been without you.
That's not nothing. On most days, it's enough.
You look at the photograph one more time. You close your office door. You pick up the briefing folder for tomorrow's budget presentation. Because at this level, the battles are fought in conference rooms as often as anywhere else. And you begin to read.
Because the mission doesn't end. It just changes shape. And somewhere across the city tonight, a 23-year-old patrol officer is lying awake at 4:47 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, thinking, maybe. The cycle continues.